we have agreed that this release should be immediate.
General Schwarzkoff stayed behind to share some time with the troops, and then he returned to Riyadh, flying once again through the burning oil wells of Kuwait. One more demonstration of Saddam Hussein's disastrous legacy in the Persian Gulf.
So this desolate corner of Iraq now joins a long list of historic sites where the United States has received the enemy and dictated the terms for surrender. Yorktown, Appomattox, the USS Missouri. Those may have been longer and costlier wars, but they were no more important to the young men and women who won this war in such a decisive fashion. Tom Roo NBC News in southeastern Iraq.
And yet another step towards a formal end of the war. The Iraqi government today officially accepted the UN conditions for the ceasefire. The announcement was made on Baghdad radio shortly after the military meeting in the desert. And tonight, Iraq's ambassador to the UN says he believes that some Allied POWs have already been set free.
Yes, as a matter of fact, we have already, I believe, released 10 POWs as a gesture of goodwill. 6 of them are American citizens, including one of them, the young lady that was captured a few days ago.
No confirmation of that yet from American military sources. In Baghdad, meanwhile, pictures of Saddam Hussein were released today. He remains in power there, although how much power he still has is very hard to measure. In Baghdad, Tom Aspel, who filed this report under Iraqi censorship.
These are the first pictures of Saddam Hussein released here in more than a week. According to the Iraqi news agency, this meeting was held somewhere in Iraq Saturday. Decisions were made to restore electricity, reopen schools, and demobilize some of the older conscripts in the Iraqi army. The videotape, recorded without sound, was made available to Western news agencies here in Baghdad this evening. Another videotape, this one shot today, showed Saddam Hussein chairing a meeting of his Revolutionary Command Council and leaders of the ruling Ba'ath Party. Officials here say the leadership discussed progress in the ceasefire talks and plans for wide-scale reconstruction. On the streets, people heard today that Iraq has agreed to all of the conditions laid down by the U.S. and its allies to cement the ceasefire. Now they wait to hear news of the Allied pullback from territory they occupy in southern Iraq. Baghdad radio has been broadcasting its version of events in a series of commentaries. Iraq has been victorious because it stood for right against evil, and because Iraq did not bow to the political demands of the West, it says. There have been no detailed accounts of the fighting, nor lists of casualties released here yet. This man, Omar, he wouldn't give his family name, came back to Baghdad this morning after 66 days at the front lines on the Kuwait-Saudi Arabian border. His cousin was killed beside him, so was another man, a neighborhood friend. He won't talk of the fighting, other than to say he never wants to see another war. There has been some good news here. Limited electricity is now available in some areas of the capital. It's only for an hour or two every night at the moment, but it's the first in nearly 7 weeks. It's enough to power the television station. Tonight's programming is a little singing and dancing and an Egyptian movie. No scheduled news broadcast yet. If there are to be changes here, they'll be slow. The country still hasn't found its feet yet, but the capital is calm and quiet. People seem to be waiting for the return of their soldiers from the front and for the Allies to withdraw from Iraqi territory in the south. Tom Aspel, NBC News, Baghdad.
Baghdad may well be calm and quiet, as Tom Aspel reports, but there is a great deal of turmoil, even reports of chaos in the southern part of Iraq, the area closest to the battle zone. The French news agency reported today that thousands of Shiite Muslims have taken up arms against Saddam's regime in 4 locations, including Basra. That's the country's 2nd largest city, and that's the military command center that suffered such heavy bombing during the war. Today, NBC correspondent George Lewis tried to travel by car from Kuwait City to Basra, but he ran into trouble.
On the outskirts of Basra, a checkpoint manned by ragtag remnants of the Iraqi army. The men have few arms, little food, and only limited transportation. We were turned back at the edge of the city by soldiers throwing rocks and wielding knives. There are things going on inside Basra they didn't want us to see. Refugees fleeing down the road to Kuwait tell of a state of anarchy there, of fighting inside Basra between anti-government factions and troops still loyal to Saddam Hussein. The strongest and best armed of the anti-Saddam groups are the radical Shia Muslims with close ties to Iran. These men say that there's shooting everywhere, that mobs burned all of the pictures of Saddam. A young man who said he had been imprisoned for 6 months in Iraq because he was a Kuwaiti resistance fighter said that anti-Saddam mobs stormed the prison, killed the guards, then freed everyone inside. He showed us the scars and bruises on his arms and legs where he said he had been tortured. A companion said Iran is sending arms to the anti-Saddam forces. Refugees are mostly on foot, trying to make the 40-mile journey from Basra to the Kuwait border before the violence spreads. Families with small children who can't walk too many miles in a day are camped out by the side of the road. While the U.S. and other coalition forces continue to hold territory in this part of Iraq, they have steered clear of the cities where the trouble is going on. So a ceasefire with the Allies has not ended the shooting and the killing in Iraq. A country in ruins now beginning to be torn up by internal strife. George Lewis, NBC News, on the outskirts of Basra, Iraq.
And now the next major step in the Persian Gulf is to make sure that what has happened doesn't happen again. Today, President Rafsanjani of Iran said his country is willing to participate in a new security arrangement in that region, but he warned that American forces should not be part of it. Iran, which will now be a major party in the region, wants the U.S. troops to go home. And today, Secretary of State James Baker said that the Bush administration wants to bring all American ground forces home from the Gulf as soon as possible, but he also said that a large naval presence and Air Force units might stay on there. Baker was on our Meet the Press program this morning. He indicated that when he goes to the Middle East this week, he will not try to impose a settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And he also said that King Hussein of Jordan, who sided with Saddam Hussein in this war and crisis, could play a constructive role in the Middle East in the future.